Happy Sabbath to each of you. It's nice that you are here. There are three things that I really enjoy watching. I enjoy watching the Holy Spirit operate. I enjoy watching people when they are in groups. And I enjoy watching somebody explain to me how the brain functions. And tonight I get to do all three of those things. I get to watch the Holy Spirit bringing us and this dear friend of ours together. I get to watch you all respond non-verbally to some of the information you're going to hear tonight. And I get to listen to one of the experts on how our brain functions. So, Dr. Taylor, welcome. We have visited before in a different setting when you came to pastors' meetings, but we'll talk about that later. So let me open with a word of prayer. I will hand the microphone over and go sit next to the college kids in the back who are talking and see if I have any parental control. I promise nothing. But let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the Sabbath that has begun. We thank you for this opportunity to celebrate the Sabbath with you by learning about your creation and how the human mind works. We ask the Holy Spirit to be here to bless both us, the listeners, and your speaker. For we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, sir. So I just met another preacher's kid. That's always such a comfort. I really shouldn't probably even tell you I'm a preacher's kid because there's this huge stereotype, about preacher's kids. And if you aren't one, you have no idea how bad it is. Being a preacher's kid was the worst experience of my life because every member in every church knew exactly how my brain needed to function, and they were not reticent to tell me. And they were all off the mark. But with a little maturity, that was the late 1800s. With a little maturity, I can now say it was probably also the best experience of my life. It certainly keeps me from sinning in the present because I can't go anywhere, but I meet somebody who knows me or somebody, my parents, something like that, so I joke that it keeps me from sinning. But I do have a special affinity for other preachers' kids, so I'd really encourage you to cut them a little slack. I tell you. Well, I don't know if I like you. I know I like your brain. Okay, so here's the deal for those of you whose brains want the big picture. And by the way, I'm delighted to be here. Dr. Brewer and I have talked about the brain since Hector was a pup, which is a long time ago. We worked together for a number of years. In fact, the very first all-day seminar I ever did on brain function, Dr. Brewer hauled his teachers from Pleasant Hill over to hear that first seminar, and I really ought to have paid them for coming. But we go back a long time, and we've spent the whole day talking about brain function. All we are is our brain. We believe it is the brain, it is the organ through which the Holy Spirit reaches us. And my brain's opinion, which is all I have, is the more you learn about it in general, and the more you learn about it in particular, allows you to live your life by design the way your brain was designed to function. So we're going to do two sections tonight. The first one is called Meet Your Amazing Brain. And I've thrown in some of the really new stuff on communication that we don't have any idea what the medium is that allows the communication to occur, but it's really fun to talk about. And the second section is about the current research on how differently males and females respond to stressors. And once we finish that, I hope especially all you male brains take another look at stress and the way it impacts any of the females in your life. Because what I often hear is a male and a female will be going through a stressful situation and it seems much worse in her brain, and he'll go, "It's not that bad, just get over it." What's the big deal here, folks? Well, it's a big deal in the female brain. So we'll talk about that. And the incidence of PTSD, for example, in returning war veterans who are female versus males. So it's a big deal. All right. We'll take a break in the middle. Oh, and before I start on brain benders, which boot up your brain like you boot up a computer, somebody just told you to sit down. Well, I'm going to tell you the opposite. Get up anytime you want to. Stand at the back, pace, whatever you want to do. Because in some studies, 50% of brains only learn when they're standing and moving. So think back to middle school and high school, even elementary school. What were you told to do? Sit down, shut up, and be still. And it doesn't work for half of brains. So if you've got that kind of brain, get up any time. How would you know if you have the kind of brain that learns best if you're standing and moving? What's the first thing that happens when you try to sit down and be still? You start to fidget. And if you see anybody fidgeting or anybody sitting there with their leg going or their fingers tapping, you know they have a brain that needs to move to learn. And that might be enough to keep them tuned in, might not be. If you don't get up, what's the second symptom? No, that's the third one. What's the second one if you don't get up? Your mind starts to wander. Because even if your body can't move, your mind can. So you have no idea what's going on. You're thinking about, how you can get out of being a preacher's kid. And then if you still don't move, then you fall asleep. So that's the research. Get up anytime you want. All right, brain benders. These are whole brain puzzles. There are hundreds of them on my website. You can go to my website, click on brain aerobic exercises, hundreds of these and other puzzles. And the current wisdom is 30 minutes a day of stimulating whole brain aerobic exercises if you want to retain your marbles for a long time. And we're even finding that some people who are losing some of their brain faculties start working on brain aerobic exercises and they get some back. So you might want to start doing that. So each little, and by the way, I'll probably be sitting part of the time. I have a hip here who it has decided it needs to be replaced. So we're working on that. So each little box is a puzzle. No right or wrong answers, just what my brain thought of. So let's see what your brains do. Just some little phrase that triggers your brain to think of. Spaced out works. Anything else? It could be, but I'm not going that direction. I just want to know what is spread out, spaced out, out of touch. Any of those things could work. Second on the left. Chinese checkers, and that's the only one I'd thought of till a couple of weeks ago, and I was making this presentation, and the guy in the front said, well, why can't that be check on the Chinese? Works for me. Third on the left, a word in a word, and the brain doesn't care if the letters go forwards or backwards. Your brains can do this. One word starts here with the T and goes this way, and the other word starts at this T and goes backwards. Towel. Towel is one of the words. Good. What's the other one? Throw. So there you go. Throw in the towel. Excellent. Bottom left. Sign on the dotted line, or nobody signed on the dotted line. It's amazing how different brains look at the same thing and have different answers. Top right. Timing is what? Good. Excellent. Second on the right. Look on the bright side. Third on the right. Good. Light at the end of the tunnel. Fourth on the right. Fourth on the right. Could be sit up. Could be sit down. What's under the letters? What are those? Lines, all right? Where are the lines in relation to the rest of the box? Are they in the middle? Where are they? This is the side, right? It's not in the middle, it's on the side. Sit on the sidelines. There you go. That's fabulous. Now, how many of you have done these before? All right, a few of you. The rest of you haven't or don't remember it. You've already started to lay down a piece of software in your brain. Because when you do something once, the brain begins to lay out software just in case you ever might want to do this again. So the second set we'll do will be easier than this one, and the third one will be still easier. That's the brain function research. What's the application? Be careful what you do once, because you'll already have software starting to be laid down, and it makes it easier to do it again. I can't tell you the number of young people who've come to talk to me who say, I didn't think that's something I'd really want to do over and over again, but I was curious. I wanted to do it once. Oh, yeah, well, it didn't turn out to be such a good thing, but they had done it once, and then they got triggered to do it again, and when you've done it once, it's easier the second time, and so on and so forth. So you really do want to be careful what you do once. On the other hand, if you're trying to develop a new behavior, just do it once. You're going to actually exercise for 15 minutes a day. Do it once. And now you've got the beginning of software. Yes, you'll have to use some willpower to activate it, but it's amazing how quickly the brain responds. What do you see? Well, there are two profiles there. You're absolutely right. There's a cutaway of two profiles against a white background. There's no vase there. There are only two profiles. But a certain percentage of brains will actually see what they think is a vase and then not, and it'll take them a while to see the profiles. Because the brain's always trying to make sense of things. And we don't know exactly what triggers the brain to do what, but we think that people who have a right-brained energy advantage may see the facial profiles first because faces are recognized in the right hemisphere. And people who think they see a vase there, which doesn't exist, probably have their energy advantage on the left side of the brain that recognizes bounded shapes, but not faces particularly. Now, let me show you this one. What does your brain see first? Now, most people see the vase first because there are no profiles there. What is there is just the edge of the vase, which actually is the same as that. And it's so fascinating because we argue about stuff less than this. You know, we do. When you do large sample studies of the reasons people argue, one of the brains thinks it really knows. And if it talks louder and longer and throws in some pejoratives, maybe this unenlightened brain will get it the way my brain does. That's pretty much of a dead-end street, actually. So I'm going to give you the little piece of brain information. Then I will tell you how I practically apply it, because a fact is just a fact unless you can practically apply it. So here's the brain research. Human brains are more alike than we are different, and that's gender, age, race, culture. Our brains are more alike than they are different. We are members of the same species, except the same guy who said check on the Chinese, when I made that comment, said, well, most of us are. But I wonder who he knows. However, having said that, there are no two brains that we have ever looked at in terms of brain imaging equipment that are the same, identical in structure, function, or perception. Not even the brains of identical twins. So that's the piece of research. Everything I'm presenting to you this weekend is filtered through my brain's perception. You can go to my website and look up the research pieces, and you might have a slightly different take on it. But that's the best we can do, because that's all we have is our brain's opinion. So what are the applications? Well, number one, stop expecting any other brain on this planet to ever understand yours, period. Because you don't even understand your own brain. If you did, you would be consistently successful, because you have in your brain the ability to be successful if you are aligned in what you do with what your brain does energy efficiently. And secondly, then we go back to the words of Paul to avoid meaningless controversy and foolish argument, or vice versa. Because when you argue, you are simply arguing two brains' opinions. That's all it is. Can't tell you the last time I had an argument. Number one, my brain function really doesn't like conflict and arguing. But number two, I'm so clear that all I have is my opinion. And I'm really clear that's all you have. I'm perfectly willing to share my opinion with you. I'm perfectly willing to listen to yours. I understand that we may agree, we may disagree. I know how to compromise if we have to come to one solution. But that's all that's happening. And we waste heat, light, life energy, relationships, all kinds of things because we're arguing. So if you really get brain function, you just had your last argument. I love this particular quote, and since we now know that reading aloud for 10 minutes a day is an anti-aging strategy, how many of you read aloud 10 minutes a day? Well, good. One of you does. The rest of you will start tomorrow. I made this comment once, and a lady came up to me, and she said, I live alone. And I said, and your point would be? Either one. The research says read aloud. You don't have to read to anybody, but if you have someone who wants to listen to you, so much the better. But read aloud 10 minutes a day. All right, let's read aloud. There's never been a true war that wasn't fought between two sets of people who were certain they were in the right. The really dangerous people believe they are doing whatever they are doing solely because it is, without question, the right thing to do, and that is what makes them dangerous. And you look around at the history of our world, and you look at what's going on right now, and the dangerous people are the ones that believe what they're doing because it is, without question, the right thing to do. In fact, all it is their brain's opinion. A little bit about thinking. The brain thinks in pictures. I'm sure you all know that. Every brain can learn to see in their mind's eye the pictures that are created by their thoughts, what they read, what they hear. However, Jean and I were just having this discussion this afternoon. When you speak to yourself and others in a positive style, the picture, what you say, the picture is what you get, and there's nothing that needs to be converted. We call that a one-step process. When you speak in negatives, it's a two-step process. The brain creates a picture from the first sentence, and if it's a negative, then it has to figure out what's the opposite of that, because don't really means you do the opposite. So this comes from work by Dr. Daniel Wegner, who wrote the book, The White Bear Phenomenon. And he says, the white bear phenomenon. And he says, if you say to somebody, don't think about the white bear, what kind of representation pops into working memory? A picture of a white bear. And now that's all you want to think about. You think about it far more than you would have if nobody had said, don't think about the white bear. Which is the reason that you always tell yourself the behaviors you want and stop talking about the behaviors you don't want, because the first picture will go into working memory, and depending on how mature the brain is, it may or may not get converted accurately. So if I say to you, don't think about the white bear, the message is the picture that just popped up is not really what I'm talking about. So what's the opposite of a white bear? Well, it's a black bear if that's what the person is thinking of, but they may not be thinking of a bear at all. You know, the opposite of a black bear might be a brown mouse. There is no definitive there. And yet I grew up having everybody tell me, don't. And the pictures that go in the brain are exactly what they hoped you weren't going to do, but I don't have a clear picture of what I am supposed to do. So in a functional family, well, there are no functional families. In a moderately functional family, the research suggests that we grew up hearing 9 to 10 negative instructions for every positive. Don't forget your homework. What do the kids do? Forget the homework. You know, don't do this, don't do that. Instead of remember your homework. There's an entirely different message to the brain. Here's the homework, remember it. And if it is a family that's pretty dysfunctional, we're talking about 30 or 40 negatives for every positive. It's no wonder that we give the kids negative instructions, they follow the first picture, because the brain is not skilled at reversing that picture, and then we punish them for following the picture. Okay, whose problem is it? The person who gave the instructions, for heaven's sake. If you think it's easy to change that style of thinking when you grew up with it, think again. But it is possible to do, and it is so much more effective. So here's a cutaway of the brain. I'm sure Dr. Brewer has showed you many pictures of those. This would be the forehead if you cut it right through the nose back. This is what you'd see. You wouldn't need a microscope. You'd see these chunks. I've just pulled it apart to show you the 3 functional layers. These first 2 layers are subconscious. Lots of stuff goes on there, but no conscious thought. This is where we have conscious thought, this rind on the watermelon, so to speak. So the first and second layers don't use language, incapable of using language, but they can follow the pictures. And the pictures are created by what happens up in that third layer, how you consciously speak. If I told that kid once, I said it a million times, don't stand near the edge. So when you have that instruction, what's the picture in the kid's brain? Standing near the edge. And we lose kids every day, literally and metaphorically, because their brains cannot quickly convert the picture. It's not the way the brain functions best. So the bottom line is you always tell your brain and other brains what you want to have happen as if it's happening right now. Stop with all the negatives. So I do, remember your homework, go to bed now, on and on. Stop with the negatives. Even in joking, researchers say avoid all pejoratives. Because if you say to yourself as you get up in the morning and try to wipe the cobwebs out of your eyes and make your way to breakfast, oh boy, I feel another bad day coming on. Well, your third brain layer that has a sense of humor, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow night, it's able to understand that that's really sort of a joke. But the left hemisphere and the subconscious layers do not understand that that's a joke, and will likely do everything in their power to help you have a really bad day, because whatever is in working memory, the brain says that must be what they want, makes no judgment about good, bad, right, or wrong. If it's here, it'll help you achieve it. So really be careful of that. One of the researchers in California puts it this way: start being mindful of your thoughts. What's going on in your head? Pay attention to it. They're just mental events. But if you pay attention to them, you can quickly begin to define whether they're positive or negative, and you can make a choice of tweaking them in a way to be more effective. So, for example, you think something happens and you think, boy, I'm incompetent and I don't get any respect. Well, when you are aware of that thought, just say, oops, there goes that unhelpful thought again. And how are you going to alter that thought? Well, with this incompetent and unrespected, you could say, I'm capable in gaining respect. Totally different picture now that goes in working memory. It will change how you behave. It will change how you communicate. It will change over time your outcome. A little bit about maturation. This is another conversation that Pat and Jean and I have had today. One of the reasons I believe that, as Jean shared research with me today, in a quarter, 25% of the Adventist churches, there are no young people. I'm just delighted to see some young people in this one. I think one of the reasons that is happening is that we don't understand the maturation rates of the brain. And we expect kids to exhibit mature behaviors way before the brain is capable of that. And instead of just gently encouraging them with good behaviors, which they will learn fastest by role modeling, we heap a load on them that their brains can't handle. And so what would be the reason they'd even want to be there? Who wants to be somewhere where you're always being told you've screwed up again? What's wrong with you? You're making me look bad. Grow up. So here's the research. Here's a drawing of the two hemispheres of the brain. That's basically what it looks like. About the size of your two fists with 3 or 4 bridges connecting them. And somebody came up to me the other day and say, I was lecturing at a university, the freshman class in college, and he came up to me after I'd made that comment, and he goes, look at how big my hands are. I must be really smart. I really didn't want to disabuse him. I said, well, I hope so. But the truth of the matter is that smart has nothing to do with size unless you're acephalic. It's the number of connections you've got in your brain, not the size. So any of you with really small hands, that ought to make you feel pretty good. So the biggest of these 3 bridges, the corpus callosum, is not paved until age 20 or 21. And the paving is myelin, and I'm sure you've heard of that. Literally think about it as asphalt in the real world. And it takes time for that highway to be paved. And until it's paved, picture a road that's part gravel, part pothole, part, asphalt. It's not a smooth, connected road. So anybody under about age 20 or 21, that main highway is not paved, and they're at risk for shorting out all the time. And when that brain shorts out, we cut them no slack. What does shorting out look like? Depends on the person who's observing the behavior, but for many well-meaning but unenlightened church members, it looks like, what were you thinking? What a stupid thing to do. No, the highway's not myelinated yet. So let's try to have a little bit more genteelness to help them look at their behaviors, but that's just going to shut them down and downshift the brain. And that's the good news. Here's the bad news. This prefrontal cortex right behind your forehead, mid-20s, 25, 26, 27. I mean, this is where you've got the executive functions, willpower, conscience, morality, goal setting, all of that stuff. Not done till mid-20s. So many of us made life-impactful decisions long before our brains were done. And sometimes it works. I'll take a risk. Pat and Jean just had their 50th wedding anniversary, you know that. I couldn't be here. I was in the Bahamas. They got married before their corpus callosum was done. Forget their prefrontal lobes. And in some people, they're lucky and it works. It doesn't always work. I got married when I was 19. I think the reason I got married when I was 19, because this is what my parents said to me from the time I can remember. Don't get married before you graduate. Is that a negative or a positive instruction? Negative. What's the sequence of pictures? Married before you graduate. My brain did not reverse the pictures. I got married when I was 19 and didn't understand the reason they were completely underwhelmed. Of course, it was an abysmal decision. But then, frankly, I was tired of being a preacher's kid. And that seemed a fast way out. If I'd known this, I might have chosen a different course. But I do believe if my parents had talked to me differently, I might have had a different outcome. Because if they had said it to me positively, how would that sequence of words gone? Could be wait, but if you want to do pictures, graduate before you get married. Now, see what a difference of sequence in pictures it is? Now, the research shows that nothing is 100%. But many studies suggest an 85% advantage, increased risk of following a positive instruction versus a negative instruction. I'll take the 85%. That's a huge risk. But that means it's incumbent on me to understand how I'm speaking to myself and others. And then you've got this 2 to 3 years difference in brain development on top of, corpus callosum's not done till 20 or 21, prefrontal lobe's not till mid-20s. So if you've got a room full of 14-year-olds, you don't have a room full of 14-year-olds. You got 30 kids who may be chronologically 14, but their brain development probably ranges anywhere from, 12 and a half to 15 and a half. That's a huge spread. And so you'll have all kinds of levels of performance with any given group of kids of the same chronological age. And we don't always factor in for that. And then you've got the male brain. Male brain takes about 1.6 years longer to develop. Well, when you do large sample studies and males and females get together to partner, the male is usually slightly older than the female. Unless the female is really smart and is marrying somebody her age or slightly younger, because men don't live as long as women, and that means that she gets to live with them a little longer. So pay attention to that. But nevertheless, males metaphorically get a set of binoculars behind their eyes. Takes a long time to craft a set of binoculars. Women never get that set of binoculars. And that makes a whole interesting discussion. So it's not because the brain is stupid. It's because it gets something that the female brain doesn't get. A couple things about PET scans. I'm sure you know what a PET scan is, right? Up and down means yes. Positron emission tomography, it's a way of scanning the brain while a person's alive and they can see how it's working. All right, here's the deal. They were doing PET scan studies, and they were asking the participants to do various things, answer questions, read a paragraph, do math, whatever, so they could see where in the brain, in these 4 cerebral chunks, the cells were helping them do that activity. And that's where we've gotten a lot of information about brain function. And they found that the participants of different ages responded differently. And this was not part of the experiment. They found that if the individuals were above age 21 and they were asked to do something or a question, they stayed up in this top third conscious thought layer of the brain. Such a deal. The participant and the researcher are all thinking up here with this cognitive part of the brain. If they were below the age of 21, they tended to downshift immediately into the second layer, which, of course, is subconscious thought. So now you've got conscious thought going past subconscious thought, and communication's not working really well. I think this has everything to do with generation gap. I think we speak in a way that downshifts brains that aren't done yet. And now we think we've got a lot of cognitive function here, and we have just triggered their brain to downshift into the emotionally reactive area. And then we wonder how come communication's gone south. Doesn't take rocket science. And then they discovered it didn't matter how old the people were. If the researchers started the question with the word why, everybody downshifted, above age 21 and below age 21. And they wrestled with this for a while. What's going on here? They finally decided that at least in English and major European languages, if you say to somebody, why did you wear that shirt tonight? That was not a real question. It was meant to be rhetorical. When you ask a why question, the implication is what? You should have done something different. I haven't told you what it is yet, but you should have done something different. And that's just enough anxiety to push that brain down into the subconscious layer. I married a man who had 3 little boys. They were 3, 4, and 5 when we got married, and I raised them. They lived with us. He had custody of them. I'm not particularly recommending that. I'm just telling you what I did. Loved them to pieces, but I made so many mistakes on them that I regularly have to call them up and invite them over for dinner and apologize, because I'll apologize for anything that I did that I didn't know better. And it's made an interesting dent in our relationship. I'll call them and say, do you guys want to come to dinner Thursday night? Yeah, Mom, what are you going to apologize for this time? Wait till you get here. So one of the things I realized I was doing was I was asking them, why? Why'd you forget your homework? Why didn't you practice? Why didn't you? So we get this research, and I'm, as they say in England, my father was English, I was gobsmacked at how dysfunctional that was. So I called the guys together and I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm getting the word why out of my vocabulary. I'm going to stop asking why. No brain can answer the question why. No brain can, adult or not adult. The best you can do is give your own brain's opinion of contributing reasons, but that's it. So I'm going to stop asking that. And here's the deal. I'm going to put a piggy bank on the dining room table. If I use why and you catch me before I catch myself, we'll put a quarter in the piggy bank. And I know pizza's not the best food, but you love it. And so, 6 months from now or so, we'll go out for pizza. They got into it. I've never had them listen to me so carefully. We had pizza 3 times the first week. I had no idea that was what was coming out of my mouth. But that's the way I'd been done to. And the research is we either do the way we've been done to or 180 degrees different. And 180 degrees different from dysfunctional is still dysfunctional. So you have to make a choice to learn more functional ways of relating. So there's lots of ways to get information without asking why. And that's pretty much out of my vocabulary. Every once in a while, if I'm tired or preoccupied, I'll hear why and I'll back up and stop and rephrase it. A little bit about neurons so that we can now start talking about some of these communication mysteries. This is a drawing of a neuron. You all know what a neuron is. Up and down means yes. Okay, it's the thinking cell in the brain and body that can actually exchange information easily with each other, and without that we couldn't think. So researchers believe that the neurons in your brain form the basis for your IQ. Several researchers talk about these neurons being arranged in the brain in fields of 1 million neurons per field. So just picture fields in your brain, wheat, sunflowers, artichokes, I don't care. You've got lots of fields. And all of the neurons in a field are vibrating at the same frequency. The interesting thing about them is that they act as radio transmitters, meaning they're sending out that frequency all the time, and they're registering the frequencies that come from other brains. And it usually happens at a very subconscious level, but you can become increasingly aware of this. So when you meet somebody that you instantly like, all that means is that your brains have recognized commonality of frequencies. You may not want to take them home with you. That's when you need to look at the prefrontal cortex and do a few more questions. It is a good basis if you want to partner with somebody, but even then, you've got to really look at that. And people don't understand that. But I feel wonderful around that person. I love being with them. I want to marry them. I want to live with them for the rest of their lives. Well, just because you have commonality of frequencies is no reason to do that. And we need to teach people that. When I lectured on multiple programs in California for people with addictive behaviors, first thing you teach them is this. You're in your group of other people struggling with addictive behaviors, and you see somebody across a crowded room and your heart starts going thump, thump, thump. Run the other way. You would not want to hook up with somebody who's got the same kind of problems you do, because there's no way you could help each other. I mean, look at Elizabeth Taylor hooking up with the guy that she met in rehab. Now, by the same token, you meet somebody and you dislike them. Sometimes they're putting out really negative electromagnetic energy and you need to pay attention. But sometimes it's just that there's no commonality of frequency. I don't choose who I work with. I sure choose the people I spend my discretionary time with. But I don't choose the people I work with. And sometimes somebody will get hired and I don't particularly like them. But that's neither here nor there. I just think, oops, we have different frequencies. And as I work with them often, I start appreciating their skills and their competence, and we actually become good colleagues, but we never are ever going to have that easy, really like being around them. Now here's a male-female difference. In large sample studies, males work fairly easily with people that they don't like. They don't have to like them to work with them. Women think they have to like the people they work with. That's a problem. I was at a hospital the other day and a manager was talking to me. He manages a department where they're primarily female employees. He hired this new woman. He's got women running into his office saying, I don't like her. I don't want to work with her. He says, I don't think I was too gracious, but at the last staff meeting, I just said, look, get over it. You don't have to take her home and live with her. Just work with her. So if you know there's a difference and you're female, then you can sort of make a different choice. Had a woman come to me and say, we were talking about this, and she said, well, now that makes sense. My husband works with somebody that he just can't stand. He thinks the guy's just a flaming idiot. But he says, we were at the Christmas party. And he saw the guy, and he went up and shook his hand and patted him on the shoulder, and then he came back to our table, looked at me, rolled his eyes, and sat down. I go, what did you do that for? He goes, I have to work with him. She says, but you can't stand him. He goes, I know, but that's my problem, not his. That's pretty functional. Your heart neurons form the basis for emotional intelligence, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow night. Least number of neurons that have ever been counted in a heart, according to McGill University, where they're doing a lot of this research, is 40,000. So yes, you think with your heart. It's about the size of one fist. 80% of your success in life is probably due to your level of EQ, and you can do everything about that. So When I was a girl, you remember the text, as you think in your heart, so are you? King James Version. I remember asking my Bible teacher, what does that mean, as you think in your heart? Well, what did we know back then in the late 1800s? This is what he says. Well, you know, they were fishermen who wrote the Bible. Just discount the word heart. Just substitute in there, as you think in your mind, so are you. No, now we know, as you think in your heart, so are you. You don't know cognitively what's happening in your heart till you give enough time for the information to go from the heart neurons to your brain neurons, and then you might be able to start making sense of something. But yeah, you think with your heart. You think with the neurons in your gut. You know that, right? At least 1 million neurons in your GI tract. 90% of all the serotonin in your brain and body is in your GI tract. What's serotonin? It's the chemical that helps you sleep, among other things, but it also helps you not be depressed. Who's got more serotonin in their brain and body, males or females? Males, absolutely. Who's more depressed in this country? Females? Differences. And that may be true. I can't answer that question, but we have a lot of metaphors that are now turning out to be real in terms of brain imaging research. So it's entirely possible. But besides the fact that women have less serotonin, which means we really need to be diligent to laugh more, learn male humor, understand their jokes and choose to laugh at them. I mean, come on. It's a whole lot better than trying to take medication. And then we've got 50% of dopamine. Dopamine is what? The chemical that makes you feel better and is involved with every addictive behavior that we've ever studied. Half of that is in your gut. We didn't know that. So because of that, the enteric nervous system is starting to be called the second brain. And believe me, we think. When something is bothering you mentally or emotionally, you often get an upset stomach. You know, cramps, diarrhea, constipation. It affects that part of your body. In fact, irritable bowel syndrome, its newest label is enteric neuropathy, which is really fascinating. Okay, couple of mysteries, and then we'll take our break. I just love this kind of research, you know. I know you can't tell that I love it, but I'm telling you that I love it. So researchers take a swab the inside of somebody's cheek, get a sample of white blood cells, dump it in a test tube, hook the test tube up to the kind of instrumentation that you would use to do a pattern of the electrical waves of the brain. Now you take the donor, the person who owned the white blood cells, and you take them off-site away from the laboratory. The latest research is 25 miles, but I haven't even updated my slide yet. So they've got the white blood cells here hooked up to instrumentation. They've got the person up to 25 miles away. Researchers are on the phone to each other. First thing that happens is they say to the researcher with the person, with the donor, ask them to think of a time when they were really, really angry. Something happened that really, really made them angry, and ask them to feel that anger again. Within a fraction of a second, the equipment on the test tube of white blood cells goes bananas. It's reacting to the person's anger all those many miles away. Then you say to the person, think of some time when you were really frightened and remember how scared you felt. And the white blood cells go bananas. And you say, think of a time when you were really, really sad and something was just awful that happened in your life. and the white blood cells go bananas. When they asked the donor, now think of a really good time in your life, a time when everything was going really well and you felt good. Little or no reaction in the white blood cells. Do you understand the implications of that? When you allow yourself to be in a state of anger, a state of fear, a state of sadness, and you perpetuate that rather than just getting the information from the emotion and moving on, think what you're doing to the white blood cells in your own body, because you're impacting them 25 miles away. Best argument that I know of for learning how to manage emotions and feelings effectively. You've heard of pheromones. Pheromones are chemicals that are secreted by one species and can be picked up by members of the same species. So far, we don't think you can pick it up from other species, but you certainly can pick it up from your own species. And I love this study. I think it's just too great. Took a rat, happy little rat, put it in this cage, got plenty to eat and drink, it's got things to play with. It's pretty happy as a rat. And the rat brain, you know, is really quite analogous to the human brain. Some people come up to me and go, "Don't tell me my brain is like a rat." Well, it is. That's why they make good research creatures. So they got this little rat. They take rat number 2. Happy little rat, nice cage, lots to play with, plenty to eat and drink. Put it clear on the other side of the building. Now, in the room where rat number 1 lives, they bring in a live snake. It seems that rats have an innate, inborn aversion to snakes. I don't know if this is cellular memory, but it seems like they've all got it. So they start bringing this live snake close to the cage, and this rat goes ballistic. In a fraction of a second, what's happening to the rat on the other side of the building in his cage goes ballistic. We have no idea how they're communicating. We don't know that. But my thought is, I wonder if they're using a form of energy that's the same as the energy that's used when we pray. Because it can't be electromagnetic energy, that's too slow. And quantum physics is now talking about a form of energy that's instantaneous. Is it that by which the rats are communicating, or is it pheromones? And we don't know at this moment. But even if it's pheromones, it has to get somewhere to the other rat. And we don't know how that is, but I find it fascinating. So when somebody in the house is angry and upset and moody and, cranky, you don't think that's impacting everybody else in that environment? I think so. In humans, there's no odor. You can't pick up any kind of scent with pheromones. But there have been several studies, and they have been repeated, showing that women who work or live together eventually synchronize their menstrual cycles. So I think that's fascinating. Somebody said to me the other day, "You mean women who live in a girls' dorm all year change their menstrual cycles?" And I go, that's what the research is. That eventually they're all pretty much starting and stopping close to each other. One of the girls' deans says, "Oh, wouldn't that be horrible? Everybody would be just feeling awful for the same 5 or 6 days." And the assistant dean said, "Well, but then you'd get it over with. And you'd have, 3 really good weeks." So, research on babies. This started with premature infants that weren't doing very well and were dying in the incubators. And so one enlightened healthcare professional said, "I wonder if maybe we ought to let the mothers come in and touch these babies and hold them and, maybe they do better." So the first thing was the mothers could come in, put their hands into the incubator and touch the babies, and by George, they did better. And then they said, well, instead of feeding them formula, what if we had the mothers pump their breast milk and bring that in and see if that made a difference? So they started doing that. And here's this little premature baby in the incubator sucking on formula, and they take the bottle out of its mouth and give its mother's milk, and all of a sudden, their vital signs change. Heart rate slows down. They're just doing a whole lot better just drinking their own mother's milk. And then they decided, when they learned more about pheromones, let's make some soft little pads of cloth. And they had people sew these, like 3 or 4 layers of flan, a little heart shape or a little square. And they would say to the mother, when you're pumping your breasts for breast milk, put this little flannel pad right against your skin. And then they come to the hospital, and baby starts sucking mother's milk, and the vital signs are doing a whole lot better. And then they take this little piece of flannel that's been on the mother's skin, and they put it in the incubator on the baby's skin, and the vital signs further smooth out. Something's happening. It's just amazing. I think that's one of the problems with adoption. The baby is not with the mother that they just spent 9 months learning about. And sometimes that has to happen. But I think that's hard for those babies, because now they have to learn a whole new set of pheromone signals, if you will. All right, last one, electromagnetic energy. I'm sure you know about this. We'll go through it really quickly. It's a form of radiation energy, very much like the rays of the sun. It's generated, so it's probably generated by every neuron, but so far it's been studied in the brain and the heart. And there seems to be a difference. I found one study that said the heart neurons generate M energy that's 5,000 times stronger than the brain neurons. It travels at the speed of light. That's the reason I think prayer, the kind of communication we've been talking about, can't go on M energy, because it's not fast enough. It forms an energy field, and before any of you faint, it forms an energy field around the body that can be measured out to about 12, 15 feet, but it's strongest within 3 feet. So every one of you that is sitting within 3 feet of another body is being impacted by the electromagnetic energy that those neurons are putting out. Have you ever gone somewhere and sat down and felt uncomfortable and got up and moved? Most people have. Didn't know the reason, just moved. Likely, you were sitting in the range of somebody who is not having a good day and was putting out negative N energy, and your body didn't like that. Have you ever gone and had a massage and go, I'm never going back to that person again? Because you're being subjected to their electromagnetic energy. You can take pictures of this with many different types of equipment, and I've seen several of them. One of them was a beautiful light about 15 inches wide around the person's body, and it reminded me of the words of Ellen G. White, where she said that Adam and Eve were surrounded by a, whatever you want to call it, a cloak of light. And I think it's in Spiritual Gifts. She said when they would walk over and that light shone on a plant, somehow it allowed them to understand what was going on in the plant, including the process of photosynthesis, which is just fascinating. And then when they had to leave the Garden of Eden, that light is not usually visible, but you can take pictures of it. So the researchers were showing me this and going, boy, that person's doing really well. Look at that beautiful light. Showed me another picture about a 3-inch dark black band around. Said this person is really depressed, suicidal, life's not working for them. Look at that. Some people have labeled that an aura, and that scares people to death. And they'll say, oh, are you teaching New Age stuff? And I'll go, well, it is the 21st century, and this is a new age, so in that sense, yes. But just because a group of people have understood how powerful this is and built it into their theology has nothing to do with the original research. Now, here's the thing that it just blows me away. Take person A, put them over on one side of the room, hook them up to machines, print out a pattern of the electromagnetic energy of their brain waves. Print out a pattern of the M energy from their heart. A different pattern. One person, two patterns. Person B did the same thing on the other side of the room. So now you have two people, four different patterns. So far, the only research I know of has been done with people who like each other, couples, parent and child. Now they bring them to the middle of the room, put an arm around each other, hold hands, and watch what happens to the patterns. And the first thing that happens is in both A and B, the brain wave patterns synchronize to the heart wave patterns because the heart wave patterns are stronger. Give them another 30 seconds, and what happens? The patterns of both individuals synchronize into one pattern. So instead of two people, four patterns, you have two people, one pattern. It's just amazing. The power of touch is incredible. So if you're not having a good day, keep your hands off anybody. Because you'll impact their M energy. And if you're touching somebody, better make sure that your energy is positive, because you're going to be influencing them. Children and animals are especially sensitive to M energy. And when a kid says, I don't like that person, I don't want to be around them, avoid discounting it. There's a reason. I learned this quickly. At one point, I had this lovely little poodle. I bought her. She fell in love with my husband. Go figure. If he wasn't around, I was fine. If he was home, I was dead meat. But I learned to watch her, and I would know before he came through the door what kind of a day he'd had. So if she's at the front door going, oh, we're good to go. If she disappears and crawls under the bed, I join her. Give the man 30 minutes to unwind. And when she comes out from under the bed, I come out from under the bed. I mean, this is really powerful stuff, and we've pretty much ignored it. So I'd like to be able to tell you that my entire life I have only put out positive electromagnetic energy, and that would be a lie, and that would suppress my immune system, so I'm not going there. But I can tell you that at this stage of my personal growth and development, I only want to put out positive energy, because I'm impacting everybody I come in contact with. Somebody asked me the other day, do you think what's going on in Iraq and Pakistan is because we in the United States are putting out such bad electromagnetic energy? I thought, well, I'd hate to think that's true, but quantum physics says it's never destroyed. It goes out of your body and it's somewhere. It's impacting somebody or something. So be aware of that. All right, let's take a break till 8:15. We'll do the next section, and then you're ready to go home. Please get up and move around.
This old house I'm living in is needing repair. The windows and the shutters letting in cold, cold air. I say to myself, I'm gonna fix 'em when I can find the time. But all I'm getting lately is leaving on my mind. Lately all I've got is leaving on my mind. Seems that's all I'm thinking about most all the time. But soon, yes, very soon I'll leave my troubles all behind. Lately I've got leaving on my mind. Some folks say I should be looking for a better place to live, but I just can't seem to get excited about this world and all it might give. I couldn't care less if I could buy it all with a solitary dime. For what good would a world do me with leaving on my mind? Lately all I've got is leaving on my mind. Seems that's all I'm thinking about most all the time. But soon, yes, very soon I'll leave my troubles all behind. Lately I've got leaving on my mind. Lately I've got leaving on my mind. The King and I walk down life's road together, where many people go passing by. The greatest one and I, a lowly beggar, walk hand in hand. The King and I. Why he should care for me will always be a mystery. the whole world in his hands, but who am I? And so my heart somehow can't help but wonder why we're together, the King and I. The King and I, not long ago, were strangers. I walked alone, not knowing why, until he came and put his arms around me. Now we're not strangers, the King and I. Why he should care for me will always be a mystery. He holds the whole world in his hands, but who am I? And so my heart somehow can't help but wonder why we're together, the King and I. Now we're together.
Well, but the book of Daniel
And
in the last days.
The ancients knew a lot more than they had written down for us.
Well, and
Maybe
they've
some of the
written
books
it.
they've written, we're not reading.
Well, but we don't, they use different words. Like in the spirit of prophecy, temperament is the word Gene used for brain function. It's
It's there all the time.
when
We
my
just have
soul
discovered
is singing.
all right. Can we get going here? I'm sure you want to get home before midnight. So here's the deal. What's the rule when I'm speaking? What's the rule when I'm speaking? Get up and move around anytime you want to. Do you remember me saying that? Good. All right. Let's do the second half here. Top left. To the right. Right side. There you go. Second on the left. Word in a word. One starts here and goes this way, and one starts here and goes this way. Travel in style. Good. Third on the left. I suppose it could be de-stressed. I was thinking stressed out, but, you know, there's no right or wrong here. You take two brains and they'll look at something different. Bottom left. Well, if all the letters were there, the word would be stressed, but they aren't all there. So how about unending stress, or stress isn't done yet, or you might think of something else. Top right. Waking up. Good. Second on the right. All right, there's first and there's class, and what's in first class? I'm in first class. It hasn't happened lately, but third on the right. Third on the right. What? Give me an answer. It's so simple. Exactly. It's wrong. Or it doesn't add up. Good. You know, people struggle. Did I forget in algebra something that should help me out? No, it's just wrong. And people are scared to say that. I find it fascinating. All right, and fourth on the right. Eustress, excellent. I think I am going to take my little hip here and give it a little break. I'm looking for the day in a few months when I look a little bit more elegant. But it is what it is. So far, it hasn't affected my brain. All right. Now, I would like you to read this, and I would like you to tell me how many times the letter F, as in finished files, occur in this paragraph. Go. How many you got? 10, 11, 7. Some of you are looking for the letter that sounds like F, because that was the example I gave, finished files. But there's a lot of ofs in here. And that's F, but it doesn't sound the same. Of course you count them. And they might skip over them, absolutely. So I'm not sure how many. Let's count them up because this is really difficult for my brain. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I get 14. Who got 14? Good on you. What? That's a sonoma. Interesting. I didn't know that. He says skipping over letters is... Now, visuals will often get all of the Fs, but auditories won't because they are listening for the F sound. Yeah. All right. So stress. New research. I love this. It explains half of what's happened to me in my life. So here's the deal. People say to me, wish I could get the stress out of my life. And I go, maybe not so much. Because the absence of stress is death. Stress is simply the word we give to the brain and body being able to respond to a request to do something different. So if I'm thinking I need to stand up, I have just stressed my body because I asked it to do something different. And when your body can no longer respond to those kind of requests, then you're pretty much history. However, chronic stress, unmanaged stress, can actually kill cells in your brain and other parts of your body. One of, the brain, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Well, I guess we'll talk about it right now. The brain is the very first body organ to recognize a stressor, and it picks up on it just instantly. Here's the thing. We often perpetuate our own stress response because if you keep rehearsing the event over and over and over again and tell anybody and everybody who will listen, and you do it with an actor's ability, with all the emotion, you can really keep that stress response going for years. So if you need to tell somebody about something, tell them. But try not to do it in living emotional color, because you will be triggering your own stress response, which can be not so good for your brain and body. Now, here's the reason that I started to do a section on stress. It has been talked about to death, in my opinion, and so I've hardly ever wanted to lecture about stress. Here's the new research, and it's just amazing. Effective stress management is critical for everybody, but especially for females, because they're twice as vulnerable as males to stress-related disorders. Who knew? Back to the rat studies. And you don't have to remember the particulars, just, let this information wash over you and get the general gist of it. In response to a stressor, corticotropin releasing factor, it's called CRF, which is both a hormone and a neurotransmitter. Some chemicals in the body are just neurotransmitters, others are hormones. This is both. It's very much like norepinephrine. It's both a hormone and a neurotransmitter. It binds to receptors on cells in the locus coeruleus, an alarm center deep in the brain. All right, here's that cutaway of the brain again. And so the locus coeruleus is down here in that first layer. What does it mean that it binds to receptors on cells in the locus coeruleus? Well, here's a picture to see if that helps you get it really quickly. The researcher says when the going gets tough, the locus coeruleus neuron in the female brain starts acting macho. So picture that this is a big circular pier, if you will. And here are docking stations. On this one, there's 7 docking stations where a boat could come in and dock and unload its, cartons of CRF, if you will. So in response to a stressor, all of these docking stations stay out on the pier so that they can all get filled with the boats and take the whole entire load of CRF that's been generated because the brain is under stress. So this increased binding heightens the brain's stress reactivity in the female brain. Have I said this in a way that you get it? Up and down means yes. Yeah, hearing yes is even better because I'm auditory. All right, now let's look at the male brain. Well, I already told you that the male brain gets a set of binoculars that females don't get. Okay, here's something else the male brain gets. In the stressed male rat, internal proteins called arrestin, see these little green things here? When that male brain gets under stress, these arrestins start pulling in docking stations, so that fewer are left on the outside of the cell. So you can see that one is in here completely. This one's pretty much in. This one's on its way in. So there's 3 in already, and that only leaves 4 docking stations. Do you realize if you've only got 4 docking stations, you can only have 4 boats dock, and you can only get the load of CRF from 4 boats instead of 7. That's huge. So there you can see them side by side. Then you can go on my website and you can find these slides, and you can click on it and actually read the original research if you want to. So you can see on the female brain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, and another one might go in. So you have these 2 brains, and they're exposed to the very same type of stressor. There's going to be an entirely less impactful reaction to that stressor in the male brain than in the female brain. And when men and women don't understand this, this is where the male is going, get over it. It's not so bad. What's the deal? This is no big deal. And she's, off the roof. And the female can understand that her brain is naturally more reactive to this particular combination of hormone, neurotransmitter, CRF stuff. And she can step back, and when he says, this isn't so bad, she can go, well, help me understand how we're going to get through this and how we're going to solve it. Because it's not going to be helpful to the female brain to say, get over it. She's got a load of CRF here, 7 boatloads worth. And you guys only have 3 or 4. That's huge. Now, according to Dr. Ben Gasser, who has done some of this work, even in the absence of any stress, the female stress signaling system is more sensitive from the start. And I think back to the years I was in elementary school. We still had chalkboards and inkwells. Some of you have never seen either one. And then we'd have this little smart aleck boy who, asked to leave to go to the restroom, and while he was gone, he'd put this great frog in one of the girls' lunch buckets. And at lunch, when she opened her lunch bucket and the frog jumped out, she screamed and nearly had a heart attack. And it took her a week to recover. And the little boys are laughing and high-fiving each other. I wish I'd thought of that. Wasn't that funny? That's hysterical. And they have no idea of the impact to her. She might not sleep for 2 or 3 nights. She's probably not going to learn at work, and she's hyperactive, and who knew? What we're seeing now is something related to PTSD. And we're finding that a certain percentage of people coming back from wars, males and females, will have post-traumatic stress disorder. Just got a new piece of information yesterday that individuals who have been ordered to kill another human being, right then and there, are at high risk for developing PTSD compared to people who are in the war but have never actually been ordered to kill another human being. Fascinating research. So we got these people coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder. And now because there's more women in the military, more women are coming back with it. And in research centers in California, they have not been understanding the reason that, if a male wants to work on it, he can recover from PTSD. But they're finding that it's taking a female 3 or 4 times longer to begin to do the recovery. And they had no idea of the reason until we got this research. So 3 types of stressors: eustress, distress, and misstress. Just a little bit about each of those because it has everything to do with how you manage stress. Eustress is what we call positive stress. You choose to do something, and so you have less of the negative impact. So I choose to, work Thursday morning at the hospital and go down to the airport and fly out here. That's stress, any way you cut it. But I'm choosing to do that. Delighted to be here, happy to do so. Love to see people that I've met before, some that I didn't expect to see, that I even remember, which is really pleasant. So you don't have the cumulative negative effects that you have when you don't choose it. So here's examples of eustress. Going to school is stressful. I got my master's degree and both doctorates, 1 class at a time, working full-time, raising 3 kids. That was stressful. But I chose it, and I didn't have very many negative effects. It's when you don't choose it that there can be some real impact. So when you don't choose it, or you made a choice that resulted in this, although that's not where you started, you didn't think about, your brain wasn't done yet, and you didn't think about the consequences, This is what you really want to avoid if you possibly can, because that's where you get really negative impact, cells dying, all kinds of exacerbation of chronic illness and autoimmune diseases and so on. So there's any number of examples of negative stress. Last time when I flew out to the Bahamas just a few weeks ago, I got off that island just hours before Isaac was doing its thing. That was stressful. I can only imagine New Orleans and Katrina and all of that stuff. I can just only imagine it. And now you take this research and you look at the difference between men and women, boys and girls. And there's some people that have been, their whole lives forever have been majorly impacted because they don't even have help learning how to deal with this. And then you've got mistress. And you notice it's spelled with 2 S's. Because when I first learned about mistress, I just spelled it M-I-S-T-R-E-S-S. And the first time I made the presentation, a lady in the front goes, "Boy, you're not kidding. My husband had a mistress, and believe me, that was really stressful." So we really are talking about mistress. And that means you don't realize the impact. And it can affect you as much as distress. And we're learning, for example, things like really long commutes. And if you're not listening to books on tape or music or something, it can be very stressful to your brain. Excessive computer usage. What's excessive computer usage? Well, it's defined as hour after hour at a computer without getting up every 30 minutes and taking a 30-second break. So how many of you who work on computers make yourself get up every 30 minutes and take a 30-second break? It's critically important to do that. Sometimes I have to set my timer, my dinger, because I'll get so involved in reading research I forget to get up and move. But it's really critical. And certainly unmanaged emotions and feelings. A little bit about work stress, just because I think this is so fascinating, and I know that you know this at some level. Employees under high work stress. How's high work stress defined? Well, it's defined as high demands, low control, and organizational injustice. Oh my goodness. Don't we all work in organizations like that? And that's really stressful to the brain, because a sense of justice, unless you're sociopathic, and that may be as high as 1 in every 25 people. New research on incidence of sociopathy, where, they just don't, it's not that they don't know when they're doing something to hurt somebody else. It's that they don't care. It doesn't bother them at a level that they care. But there's a sense of justice built into the brain. And when you're working for an organization where lots of unjust things happen and you have no control over it, that can be extremely stressful. Because we know with the research of mirror neurons in your prefrontal cortex that are just like a mirror, when you watch injustice happen, those neurons fire as if it was happening to you. And that's where the stress comes from. So here's another takeaway. The first one was, be careful what you do once. The second one is, be careful what you watch, what you observe. Because we know that watching somebody beaten up and abused, for example, your brain mirror neurons fire as if you were actually getting beat up yourself. So what are you watching on TV? What are you watching on movies? We need to really rethink that now that we know about mirror neurons. So these kinds of people tend to have increased norepinephrine levels, which are associated with the fight-flight reaction form. They release inflammatory cytokines. That's a part of the immune system that raises the temperature and brings white blood cells throughout the body and so on and so forth. And if you've got any tendency to osteoarthritis, for example, believe me, turning up the inflammatory response is going to make those aches and pains even worse. And a 50% increase in coronary artery disease and deaths associated with coronary artery disease. So when I find somebody who's had a heart attack, my first question is, you've been working lately in an organization where you've observed injustice? 50% increase in coronary artery disease. I am not advocating that you rush out and, quit your job. But if it's really significant, you might start looking for another one, because you might not want to spend the rest of your life there. I like to eat, so I want the other one in my pocket before I quit. But believe me, that's something to think about. It's expensive, work stress. Workers with high stress are twice as likely to be absent 5 or more days a year, having nothing to do with vacation. That's expensive for an organization. 40% of job turnover due to stressors. 60 to 80% of accidents. And the more stressful the workplace is, the more accidents that occur. And if you're self-insured, that could actually close your business. Do you remember, some of you will remember, when we talked about the type A personality? Do any of you remember that? Okay, we don't talk about the type A personality anymore. We talk about the AHA personality, which is somebody who has a lot of anger, hostility, and aggressiveness. And what do we find there? Well, we find all kinds of problems. Higher rates of coronary artery disease, calcification, high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, mortality. The effects of an AHA personality can equal a person who smokes or a person who has a really awful diet, high fat, so on and so forth. That's just amazing. Now you have somebody smoke, you have somebody who doesn't eat right, and they're in a work environment that's unjust, and they allow themselves to develop anger, hostility, and aggressiveness. They're just cutting off 25 years off of their lives in many cases. Social stressors appear to be key in the exaggerated physiological responses when somebody who has this, what we used to call type A personality, perceives any of these conditions, that they're being harassed, and there's any type of harassment. When somebody looks at them and they think that there's contempt or disgust on the other person's face, and when people aren't really trying to be very friendly, just exacerbates everything. This is what I find fascinating. There's a researcher in California who works with couples. When couples come to him and say, we're having difficulty in our marriage and we want counseling, he says, fine, we're going to do an hour interview and it's going to be recorded. I'm going to make a DVD, a video of the whole session. If they don't agree to that, he says, then I'm not the person for you. So he does this video, and then he spends several hours going through that video frame by frame. And if he sees contempt expressed on either or both face, any place in that hour interview, he has developed a formula based on the number of times he sees a facial expressive contempt and the risk for whether or not they'll still be together in 2 years. And so he starts working with them on what's all this contempt business. If you have no regard for the other person, don't even work on it, because it's not going to work. It's fascinating stuff. It's expensive. Unmanaged stress reactions are a more dangerous risk factor for cancer and heart disease than cigarette smoking or high cholesterol foods. And what are the consequences? Decreased cognitive ability, decreased libido, decreased energy by 30%. You've all heard of a couple who gets married and they want to have a child and she can't get pregnant. And they try and try and try. And in some percentage of cases, they'll just say, well, I'm going to give up. We'll take in a foster kid or we'll adopt a kid. So let's say they adopt a child. What often happens in under a year? She gets pregnant. Because the stress has been reduced, now her libido goes up and the pregnancy mechanism is back to some level of normal. So what are the stress interventions that you really need to be aware of, especially knowing that stress is managed differently by the female brain? You want a high-level wellness living lifestyle, bottom line. And we know what that is. The Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy are filled with directions for a high-level wellness lifestyle, which means you manage what you take in, you manage your anxiety, your sleep, you get relaxation, you play. You might have to reassess your goals and priorities. I recently had a man come to me and say, I took a new job. I took a pay cut of $5 an hour, but he said I would have been dead in 10 years if I hadn't quit. So living longer and feeling better is far more worth to me than getting the $5 an hour. So you're going to have to look at those kinds of things. What are your habitual thoughts, beliefs, expectations? Much of our stress comes from two reasons. We expect more of ourselves than is realistic. We buy into the expectations of others. That's unrealistic. So you really need to take a look at those expectations. If I had known this as a preacher's kid, I would have been far less stressed. I could stand here and tell you stories all the time. You know, I think what kept me alive was my sense of humor. But by the same token, I found myself laughing sometimes when nobody else in the church was laughing. That was not rewarded. And I remember one time when, you know, a guy on the second row, elderly man, fell asleep, slid off the pew, landed on the floor, woke up with a start. His toupee went flying. I'm totally, constitutionally incapable of seeing that and not laughing. So I'm laughing. And lady comes up to me at the end of the service and says, "Don't you think, Arlene, that it is hugely significant that there are no pictures of Christ even smiling, much less laughing?" And that really hurt my heart. I was just in Australia, my 4th lecture tour. I had a wonderful time. While I was there was an art exhibition, and the only pictures in the exhibition were pictures that artists from 20 different countries had drawn of a smiling Christ. It was just marvelous, just wonderful. And the other time I got into really terrible, terrible trouble was, back then, in the late 1800s, we moved a lot. They moved the preachers every 2.5 or 3 years. You were lucky if you stayed 2.5. Now, Andrews University did research and said 6 years is the absolute minimum that a minister needs to stay in a church. He doesn't even know the congregation well enough till then. But anyway, we moved often. And I really kind of got tired of that. It ruined my brother. I didn't like it, but I could handle it because I have different brain function. I like to find new things. So we arrive at this new church. My brain leans toward introversion, so it wasn't real easy for me to walk in as the preacher's kid and everybody's staring at you. And so I got sent off to the junior room, and I walk in, and here's this big room with chairs all around and all these kids sitting there, and I'm walking in, and, it's very stressful for me. I sit down, and the well-meaning, I'll give him that, but unenlightened leader goes, "Oh, you must be the new preacher's kid, because I haven't seen you before." Well, you're just in time. We're going around the room, and each one of us is reciting our favorite Bible verse. Since you're new, you're first. Okay. My face is a clock. 12, 6, 9, 3. 2 lines, 4 chunks of cerebral tissue. My energy advantage is up here in the right frontal lobe. Rote memorization is down here behind my left cheek. No diagonal connectors in the brain, so I can't go from here to here. To memorize anything rote, I have to cross the corpus callosum bridge and go downstairs, or go downstairs and cross the bridge on this side. So it's twice as far to get there, twice as much energy, and once I get there, it's a whole bunch more energy than... So, my father would ask me to... he told me I had to memorize a text once a week. Didn't hurt me, but it was very difficult. And he was a morning person. I'm not. I don't wake up till 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, I've completed entire seminars before I woke up. So I'd crawl out of bed and come into breakfast, and he was just bright and chipper. I mean, he was up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day of his life. And he'd go, "Good morning, Arlene." "Morning, Dad." "Tell me what John 3:16 says." "Oh, not this morning. Not this morning." John 3:16. And my little brain would start trying to think. And more often than not, I'd just come up with something like, I know what that says. It says that God loved us a lot. He loved us so much. And right there, my father would go, "Stop, that's not what it says. It says, for God so loved the world." Okay, that's rote memorization. I really don't go there. I get the gist of it, but that's hard for me. All right, so you know. I'm in the Sabbath school class. He says, "All right, give me your favorite verse." I have no idea what came over me. Only another preacher's kid would understand this. So I said very seriously, "My very favorite verse is this. It's better to be silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." Hezekiah 13:13. He didn't even know that Hezekiah wasn't a book of the Bible. He looks at me and he goes, "Oh, I think I've heard that before." Let's go home and try to find it. And I'm just, really proper. Well, he must have gone between Sabbath school and church and found a Bible and couldn't find Hezekiah because he hit my father up and said that, your daughter was lying in Sabbath school. She quoted Hezekiah 13:13, and it doesn't exist. Do something. Okay, so I got in trouble. Very stressful. All right, so change environments is needed. I'm sure that's the reason I got married when I was 19. I didn't have to go to any place and be asked any questions. Learn to recognize the protective emotions quickly and skills to manage them. And I only talk about 4 core emotions because those are the ones that you can see on the face of the fetus during pregnancy if you do a scan. And that's joy, anger, fear, and sadness. There are no negative emotions. Anger, fear, and sadness are designed to give us information about what's going on in the environment so that we can take appropriate protective action. But we haven't understood that. George Burns. Remember George Burns? Loved George Burns. If I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. Well, some of you are lucky enough that you can start taking better care of yourself at a much younger age than the rest of us learn this information. And I really encourage you to pay attention to that. The 3 reaction forms, I'm sure you know at least 2 of them, but fight, flight, the most well-studied, but here's the deal. It tends to be implemented primarily by the male brain. Research by Dr. Shelley Taylor, boy, I wish I was related to her, she's brilliant, has found that males almost always go into fight-flight in a stressful situation. Females may initially go into it if they need to save a child or something, but they quickly go into another reaction form. So if you don't know how to manage this, ulcers, high blood pressure, on and on and on, women tend to go into something called tend befriend. And we need to teach women about this because sometimes it's really helpful and sometimes it's lethal. For example, let's say that a woman has been in an environment in which she has been battered. You take her out of that environment, put her in a safe house, 3 months later, bruises are gone, bones have healed. If you don't teach her about this versus this, when you let her out of the safe house, where's she likely to go? Right back to the same environment because she's going to try harder and maybe get it right this time. And women who do that are at high risk for being killed. And we need to be teaching our young people about this. And then conserve withdraw, doesn't matter male or female. We see people go into this state sometimes when there's been an unexpected death in the family. And it's like the body goes into hibernation. And it says, I can't do anything about this, but it really hurts. So the body says, well, just sit there for a while. Just take your time. And you'll watch them often change their behaviors. For 2 or 3 months, you won't even know them. They'll change their behaviors. And then as they begin to recover, they sort of get back to normal unless they don't know about this. And a female can get stuck in this because she had a stronger stress reaction to start with. She can get stuck in this and months and even years can go by, which is unfortunate. Stress is a relative concept. Get that, because every brain is different. And then you've got the male-female division. So if something doesn't bother you, avoid assuming that it doesn't bother somebody else. And if you get a different response, that's what your brain is doing. You can learn to manage it. So you can only manage what you can label and describe, which is the reason we need to be talking about these things. Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed. But nothing can be changed until it's faced. And so if you believe that the Bible is a manual for everyday living, then we need to put this new research that's coming out, as the book of Daniel said it would, and we need to be talking about it in an everyday way to give our young people the advantage that we did not have because we didn't know this information. But are we even learning it ourselves, and are we talking about it? So identify your own stressors. Take a little time. What do you know triggers a stress response in you? How do you act when you're under stress? How long do the symptoms last? Know that about yourself, since every brain is different. In this third layer, well, you're familiar with the terms ego, id, ego, and superego, right? Okay. Well, they can be aligned with these 3 functional brain layers. So we find the id in the first layer, and the id is all about me. This is where we see little kids, 2, 3, 4. No, you can't play with that. It's mine, mine, mine. This is all about me. Or 30, 40, 50, 60, whose brains haven't developed well. You'll find the ego in the second layer. And the ego is, I've got to watch out for me, but I realize now that you're here. So I better be careful what I do, because what I do is going to impact you. And this is where you start watching brain development in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and they'll go, that's my toy. You can play with it because you're my friend. You can't because you're not my friend. But you can. And that's where you start watching that sharing piece. But what's key is the superego that lives in the third layer. And this isn't classic Greek Freudian, but it translates well. We were lucky if we had parents with a good superego, and all of us did not have that advantage. If your parents had a good superego, that meant they could do for you, for others, what you needed at the time, whether or not they felt like it. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm crying for the third time because I have a bellyache. And parents with a good superego can get out of bed and come to your room and comfort you again. Parents without a good superego may not even acknowledge you're crying, or they may scream at you to shut up, or they may come in and beat on you. You need a good superego in order to take good care of yourself. And people in programs for addictive behaviors, people with serious autoimmune diseases often didn't have parents with a good superego. I mean, that's not always true. You know, sometimes you just have things that run in families, and we don't even know the reason some things show up. But sometimes they didn't have parents with good superegos, so they did not learn how to take care of themselves. And part of stress management is making sure you have a good superego and that you can reparent yourself in adulthood as needed. Meaning, you learn to take care of yourself in the way you would have liked a parent to take care of you if you'd been fortunate enough to have one with a good superego. So that's one of the things that we also teach too. So lots of things. You can go through these slides on my website. Expectations are huge. I mean, it's just another brain's opinion. You don't have to pick it up. Ask yourself when you come to a stressful event, is this going to matter in 12 months? I routinely have learned to do this now, and it's really helpful because if it's not going to matter in 12 months, I'm putting no time and energy in on it. Just let it go. If it will matter, then I think about what I need to do. But if there's nothing I can even do about it, then that's where the serenity prayer comes in. Because a lot of us are stressed because we're trying to do things about things over which we can have no control, instead of understanding what it is we can do something about and putting our time, energy, and money there. Okay, does that give you a little thumbnail sketch of the new research? I think it's wonderful, and it's really, really helped me in my life. All right, so tomorrow morning we're talking about the new research, Physiology of Forgiveness, which I was telling the brewers, I've had the research for 7 months. 2 weeks ago is the first time I gave it. And I'm glad I did, and you're going to love it. It's really interesting. And then tomorrow night we're talking about the new research on emotional intelligence and the new research on the benefit to the brain and the immune system of laughter. All right? Have a wonderful evening. Lovely to see you. Thank you.